And we are live. We are live on a Monday afternoon. It is quarter after 12 for me on Monday, the 23rd of May. And it is quarter after quarter after three for some of you, quarter after 12 or for me. And if you happen to be in Hawaii, it's just after 9 o'clock in the morning. I was inspired to go live today by a question that I received from someone over the weekend. And actually, it wasn't even over the weekend. It was, I think it might have even been like a Thursday night kind of thing. But the question was around senior leadership alignment and organization enablement. Senior leadership alignment, organization enablement. I think what prompted this is there's been a fair amount of information that I've been sharing and kind of building up around these things as I continue to build out the coaching and advisory practice that I have here at Catalyst. And there was an evolution that happened. As far as when it started, I don't know. I mean, there's so many different views of when sales enablement became a thing. I remember the conversation Mike and I had when we were talking about what we'd call a group inside the organization that was in the process of being built when we were over in the O'Reilly days. And this goes back a number of years, but we walked out talking about sales enablement. And that was before I realized that there was going to be this thing called the Sales Enablement Society and all these other things that everybody has done from an enablement perspective. And why did we create it at that point in time? We created it because there was a gap that existed inside the business where as a revenue team or as a sales team specifically, we weren't getting what we needed in order to put our team in the best position to perform. Now, bear in mind, this is how I remember the conversation. The conversation may have been a little bit different, but this is my memory of it. Anyhow, we built the team to fulfill a need. Fast forward a couple of years later, I had an opportunity to speak at TLDC, the Learning and Development Communities Conference here in Phoenix. And I talked about sales enablement evolving to organization enablement. And the thing that I missed when talking about that is I missed that there was going to be this piece in between where we started talking about revenue enablement. Now, in the time between then and now, there are a number of people who focus on revenue enablement. There are people who focus on revenue operations. Sometimes I think the two get confused. It really depends on what your background is. If you're more of an operation-oriented person, technically driven, you may be calling this revenue operations. If you're more of a learning and development, organization enablement, people person, you might call it revenue enablement. Well, I think the next step, this next move that we're going to go through, this evolution is going to be a move toward organization enablement. Now, why? Well, if you look across a number of the challenges that we're faced inside the organizations that we are fortunate enough to get a chance to work with, work around, be a part of, or have family members who are part of, we've got people who are doing things inside the organization. But people who do things inside the organization, the people who do things inside the organization will do it based on a specific set of jobs to be done, work that needs to happen. That work should align with things that are important to the business, things, the ultimate objective of the business, the thing that the business is moving toward. And ideally, that aligns directly with the customers that are being served by the business. We all work in organizations. Those organizations will not survive if you don't have customers. They will not survive if you don't have customers. Now, there are a number of organizations who have survived in the past by being funded by other sources. Now, they could be funded by grants, they could be funded by investment, they could be funded by customers, they could be funded by an investment by the founder in continuing to build out the business. There are a number of different ways to fund businesses, and I'm not going to get into that today. I had a really good conversation here recently with David, and that podcast episode will go live in a couple of weeks, where we talk about funding sources, whether we're talking about venture capital, growth, uh, equity or private equity, and how that comes together. Back to the point. So we have people who are ultimately the connection point between your organization and the humans in another organization that you're serving. Even if there's no real reason for a person who's buying your product to connect directly with a sales rep, so to speak, or a customer success person, or whatever flavor you want to call. And I know that these words have meaning and that there's a detail behind it, but you know, ultimately, what's the job to be done for the individual? If the job to be done is to enable the customer to be as successful as possible, then call it whatever it is that you want to call it. That's a person who's helping somebody else do the thing that they want to do. Sometimes that person might be an account executive. Sometimes it might be an account manager. Sometimes it might be a customer success executive. Sometimes it might be a customer success manager. Sometimes it might be called um, a uh, learning and development leader or learning and development navigator or something like that. Anyhow, back to the point. So we have people who work with other people, either inside or outside of our organization. There are ways that we can enable those people to do things really, really well, help them thrive in their role. One way to do that is by inserting process and training on process, so that it's very clear what are the things to be done and what order should those things be done, so that you improve effectiveness and consistency in the way that you deliver it. There's a process to make a hamburger at McDonald's. There's not a lot of creativity or creative liberty that the person making the hamburger has in determining what that hamburger might look like on the other end. There's value in that consistent process in that kind of environment. Now, there are other places to get a hamburger. Like, you can get a hamburger in my backyard, and there's going to be more creativity applied to the way that that hamburger is delivered. You might be able to put tomatoes and bacon and mustard and relish and whatever else it is that you want to put onto it. But there's a time and a place for that creativity. Well, in addition to process, there's technology. Technology can be used to help accelerate those processes happening, automate components of it, make it easier for the humans to do the human things. Or in some cases, technology can be a hindrance. It can slow things down. You think about any CRM implementation that you've done where you've added additional fields just for the sake of adding those fields because it sounded like a good idea, but ultimately you didn't know what you were actually going to do with the data, or realize that the data was already available someplace else in that CRM. Anyhow, we've got people who do things. We've got processes that help those people have clarity around what to do in what order and drive execution. And then we have technology that will support those people. We can do that in a really, really small team, or we can do it in a really, really large team. So let's get back to the point. What is senior leadership alignment? What is alignment across a senior leadership team? And Michelle Baker has put together some really interesting stuff. If you're not following Michelle, make sure you do so. She is talking about creating aligned leaders in the work that she's doing. Well, one of the diagrams that she shared when talking about leadership alignment was this line of a straight line, and then there were some circles that lined up right along the straight line. And she put another one where it was a straight line and the circles are kind of moved around in each place. When you visualize that, when you see it, you can see where alignment is good versus where there is not a lack of alignment. I put a video out on, I think, Friday of last week where I talked about this in the context of a spectrum, a spotlight, a flashlight, and some laser pointers. Well, when things are aligned inside the organization, the work that gets done just things start to work really smooth. When you don't have alignment, if you take your hand off the wheel, as an example, in your car, the car will start to drift one way or the other. And over time, if you have to hold the steering wheel in one way to prevent the drift, you're going to create additional wear and tear on the vehicle. That's not great. So this is why it's important to have your alignment checked every once in a while. Well, the same thing happens inside organizations when we're talking about people. How well are we aligned as a team relative to the broader objective of the business? And this is where mission and vision come into play. When you look across your team, if there is a lack of alignment, you're going to potentially create some friction inside the business, which will might help change some things, but it might change some things for the worse. So, leadership alignment from a visualization perspective, if we were all rowing the boat, are we rowing in the same direction at the same cadence and rowing with the right tools at the same time? So that's where I start to think about leadership alignment. And as you increase the number of leaders in your organization, the risk of alignment, the challenge of alignment increases. I've been fortunate enough to work in some amazing organizations with some really strong aligned leaders. I've also been fortunate enough to work in some organizations where you can tell that there's a disconnect across the leadership team. It doesn't mean that one is better or the other. Sometimes there's a tension that's created by leaders inside an organization so that leaders continue to push each other. I don't know that that's the right way to do it. Where things start to break down, though, is when crisis happens. So, in a situation where you've got this tension where there may or may not be a level of alignment and a crisis happens, you now take on more risk than is absolutely necessary. So, what's a good way to visualize leadership alignment inside an organization? Here's the way I would do it. When you ask each leader why the company exists, do they answer in the same way? Do they use the same words? They probably apply their own story to it, but do they use the same words? When you ask the question, why do customers purchase the product? Do the leaders in the organization use the same words? When you ask the question, what problems do we solve in the marketplace? Do the leaders inside the organization use the same words? These are questions when you ask them, you should get some consistency. And that's a base level. Now you get the next set of questions is what does the future look like? Where are we going? Where are we going? If you ask these questions, there should be some consistency around where we're going. It will be directionally aligned, but there may be things that are a little bit off. And what do I mean by that? Well, the view of where we're going and how we get there might be slightly different depending on if you're talking to a product expert, a expert on the revenue side, or an expert on the ops side inside the business or engineering side. You might see some differences. So the way to identify leadership alignment is by asking questions and then listening and getting that information. Once you get that information, you can start to evaluate good, better, and best. Good means, yeah, we're all kind of directionally going in the same place. Better, we actually start using the same words. Best, we're actually able to clearly demonstrate what are the next logical steps for the business that are going to get us there. And how about this one? Where is the risk inside the business? So good, better, best. If you want to get into a WTF version, what'll end up happening is someone will say something like, well, my perspective of where we're going is this. And it's not our perspective. It's not and the language might be completely different. They might refer to things in a different manner. They'll use completely different vocabulary. So good, better, best, and WTF. So next one, organization enablement. So once we have aligned leaders inside the organization, like Michelle Baker would talk about, once we've got aligned leaders inside the organization, then we're in a better position where we can say, given where the direction we're going and the people that we have inside the organization, how can we support those people with both process and technology? Process, technology, and tools. Process, technology, tools. How can we support them? What can we do to enable the humans inside the organization to execute on the human things so that we can deliver on customer requirements? Or where can we enable customers to do the things that they're doing so that we can continue to thrive as a business? And if you can get the enablement piece right inside your organization, your people will thrive. That will have an impact on your customers. your customers will thrive, your customers will grow, you'll be able to grow your business, you'll be able to hire more people, and you'll be able to make that impact that you're working on making in the world. So this is why organization enablement, I think, is so important, because we as you spread out people inside the organization and you have different agendas and different perspectives, what you'll find is you you might start using different words. The vocabulary shifts. And if the vocabulary shifts, sometimes you're in a meeting with someone and they say something and you nod your head thinking, yep, you understand it. But the reality is they're talking about something a bit different. So, how do we, what are some of the characteristics of organizations that have a high level of enablement supporting, that are enabled? What does an enabled organization look like? What does an enabled organization look like? From my perspective, an enabled organization looks like alignment across the senior leadership perspective. It's clear where we're focused, what are the things that are going to impact our ability to deliver on those, and where are our bottlenecks, or where are risks. Once we understand the risks and our bottlenecks, we're then putting the systems and process in place to address those risks. Get rid of the blockers that exist that are going to potentially prevent us from delivering on the thing that we're delivering on. So it starts with the leadership alignment. It then starts with a true assessment of the current state of the business. And then it turns into a clear focus on those things that matter, those things that are most important. And Lee Benson joined me on the podcast a couple of weeks back to talk about the MIND methodology, which is understanding your most important number, working toward identifying the drivers that can influence that most important number, and then determining how well you're leveraging those drivers so that you can determine which ones should be in or out of focus. And you might find that the in focus number that is getting in the way of the growth inside your organization is not really on the revenue team side of things. It might be someplace else inside the organization. There might be a gap that you need to address that's getting in the way of your ability to deliver. And once you take care of that bottleneck, you can then start working on all of the other ones. So leveraging an operating system, management operating system like the MIND methodology, I think is a good thing. Now, I'm biased because I've just gone through the certification process, and I can see the fit inside organizations as we not only create that alignment inside the organization, but start enabling people inside the organization. So how do we enable people? Well, we enable those people, the people inside the organization, by making sure that they're in the right place, that they understand the work that needs to be done. And then we are supporting them either with process or technology to help that work get done at a faster clip. So what does good look like? Good looks like we're all moving in the right direction. There might be a little bit of slack or a little bit of pull in other areas, and we may not have all the technology that we need. We may even be working on building the process, but we're building that together. Better is we actually have process in place, but we're continuing to iterate on that process based on clear feedback loops that we're getting across the organization, not specifically in one team, but across the organization. Let's use the minds that exist inside the organization to help accelerate things. Best, we now layer on pieces of technology that start to reduce the cognitive load for people inside the business, help automate certain things so that humans can do better human things. Ideally, in a best type scenario, all of this aligns directly with what we're seeing from a customer perspective. This is why I'm really excited about what's happening in the product-led growth space. We're taking feedback related to what we're seeing our customers do in product to help inform how we can engage with customers as we go forward. So good, better, best. WTF, we're constantly changing where things are going. We're constantly moving people around inside the organization. We're seeing a lot of turnover and churn inside the organization. People don't really understand how the work that they're doing ultimately impacts the success of the business. If that's the situation, then it's time to make some changes. It's time to adjust, because if you keep throwing money or people at the problem, you're addressing a symptom you're not actually solving. And given where we are right now, from a money perspective, like, taking the time to breathe address things from a people, process, technology perspective can be a really good fit. So, um, good, better, best. Uh, the role of a guide inside this. So, how do you do this? Well, here's the challenge. And again, this is going to be a bit self-serving, given that I'm in the process of getting the coaching and advisory practice up. And this is what I do. This is how I want to help organizations like yours. So if this is resonating with you, where you're saying, "Hey, we're in good, and we really would like to get to best, or even just better first. Let's hit next logical steps. Let's have a conversation." My expertise tends to be on the revenue team side of things. That's where my expertise is. That's where my experience is. However, based on other experiences, the leadership side, the people side is extremely important to me. I think we could have an interesting conversation around it. And as a coach, remember the coach is not the one who's actually doing the work. If you watch a football game, whether you're in the UK or you're in the US, the coach is on the sideline. The coach is not in uniform. They don't cross the white lines. Now, there are some times where they come in there and they guide people and get people in the right place, but their job, and this goes back to a Jocko Willing thing, their job is to detach from the situation so that they can observe the situation. Let's go OODA loop. Detach from the situation so that they can observe, they can orient, make decisions, and take action. It is really hard for you to do that work when you're stuck in your own loop. When you're stuck in your own loop, and stuck in your own loop might be, I'm just acting and going to act and then going to act and then going to act. In situations where we're under high stress, high crisis, a lot of things are going on, it's really hard to detach. And that's where a coach or an enabler or someone, an advisor, can come in and help break through some of the challenges, the blind spots that exist inside your organization. And this is what I've built the practice out to do. So overall, we talked about senior leadership alignment. We got into a discussion around organization enablement. We hit on good, better, best, and WTF in each of those situations. And then we moved into a discussion around how the guide or coach can help you inside your organization. The cool thing about a guide and a coach, they're not in there for the credit. That's not what drives them. They're in there to enable you to execute on the things that are important to you. So if you're looking for a guide, you're looking for a coach, you need a little bit of help, enable the people inside your organization so that you enable the organization to thrive. You grow by addressing the needs from a customer perspective, maintaining a level of focus, prioritizing the things that are important, and working on those things in the right order. You know how to get a hold of me. And I look forward to speaking with you. Hope you enjoyed the conversation. Can't wait to see some of the feedback or questions that come up. That was a long live session. Here we go. And the next thing that actually drives me absolutely nuts is hitting the end screen and wondering what my picture is going to look like on this one. But thanks, everybody. I hope you have an awesome day, and I look forward to